want to start a little bit with the idea of, we'll start from, the book of Obadiah is really the Haftarah, Perashat Beishlach. Okay? So, I want to start with Esav. Really, this is going to be a little bit, not only about Obadiah, but a little bit about Esav and the Mikra. And we'll take a little bit of a tour about Esav and Edom in the Mikra. So I want to start with Esav and the Torah for a few minutes. Esav has an interesting relationship, right? There's this struggle more than any other two brothers, Esav and Yaakov, have this, seem to be from their birth, even from conception, we have this nevuah, ul'om mil'om ye'ematz v'rav ya'avod sa'ir, right? Affirmed later by the father, v'haya kasher tarid u'farakta u'lo me'alecha. Right? So, we have this struggle. But the struggle takes on different forms. Yaakov prays, Hasileni na miyad ahi miyad Esav. The Midrash, the very famous Midrash says, Hasileni na miyad ahi, if he acts to me like a brother, meaning nice, save me. Or if he acts to me like Esav, as fights, also save me. In either case, I'm in danger. I want to, tonight, move with that same pasuk, with a similar motif of the Midrash, but a little differently. Hatzileni na miyad ahi miyad Esav. I'm going to look at, a little bit close to the Peshat, two different forms of hatred. There's the hatred of the brother and the hatred of Esav. It'll become a little bit clearer as we move forward. It's strange to talk of hatred of a brother, but I think as we move forward, you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay? Right along in the Torah, especially in the mouths of Esav, the first time they really fight is after the Berachot. And what does Esav say? Right? He wants to kill him. And what language does he use when he says he wants to kill him? So, let's look. Right? Right? In other words, way back in Toledot, Yikrivu Yimei Levi, and what's he going to say? Hargat Yaakov Ahi. Strange thing to say. I want to kill Yaakov, my brother. Hargat Yaakov Ahi. That's the lashon that Esav says. So again, we find this idea Hasileni na miyad ahi miyad Esav as that there is a inyan of brotherly hatred. Now, we'll jump ahead. So right away we find this message of sin'ah, of hatred, and hatred as a brother. Right? Regat Yaakov Ahi. And we'll talk about what that means. Now we'll fast forward to the meeting. In the meeting, what happens? Yaakov is sholeach malachim. Yaakov is sholeach malachim. And what happens? Sends messengers. And they meet up. And he's afraid. And Yaakov is coming with 400 soldiers. Right? And that's where Yaakov is afraid. And Vayira Yaakov me'od v'yasir lo. He's afraid. And he says, Hasileni miyad ahi miyad Esav. He's not sure how Esav's going to come after him. As an or as Esav. In either case, he's afraid. And we're trying to say that there's going to be two types of an attacks. The attack of the brother, which is not, as the Midrash says, maybe the nice attack, but even a harsh attack. And what happens? Esav comes and does what? Esav comes and kisses him. And there are two ways to look at that amongst the Mefashim, right? Some say it's an outpouring of brotherly emotion. Others say what? Well, he wanted to bite him, and therefore the dots on the Vayishakehu. I will say that in either situation, no matter what, no matter which perush you take, that comes from the strength and the raw emotion of a brother. It's strange, but as the intensity of love can be, Hazal are looking, so can be the intensity of hate. It's hard to hate somebody that you're indifferent to, right? There is nobody that can hate, and it's going to sound very strange, you can't hate anybody as much as you can hate your brother. Strange thing I just said, right? Because you can love nobody like you can love your brother. It is very difficult. It's very difficult to get as angry as I am at somebody. As much as it's hard to feel that jealousy, that anger. But the brother who has been wronged or feels wronged by his brother, either he chooses one, you can't be parv. You choose one of two paths. You either forgive, your love for your brother overpowers the anger, and you forgive, and you rebuild a relationship, or you hate him like you never speak, you really hate him. It's hard to take the brother who you feel wronged by and be indifferent. Right? I think we could all understand that. The idea of that raw emotion is very difficult. So, in fact, that's exactly what the Midrash is doing. That's exactly what the Midrash is saying. The Hakamim are debating as what's happening here. Is Esav forgiving? Is when Yaakov comes back, he is in a forgiving mode? Or does he hate his guts? And he really wants he kissed him for whatever reason, but he really wanted to kill him. Right? Either way, it's approached as a brother. Right? And by the way, that brotherliness is very apparent in the text, right? Right? Vayishlach, even from the very beginning, Yaakov sends messengers to whom? The text says, what? Esav Ahiv. When Esav talks to Yaakov, he calls him what? Yesh li Rav Ahiv. Right? They keep addressing each other as a brother. So there's the emotion of the brother, right? That idea of a brother is very strong. So that it's the idea that this relationship of a brother. Now, Esav, at some point, this changes. So now, like I said, whether there's love, whether there's hate, there's definitely the relationship of the brother, where that relationship causes, as we saw clearly at the end of Toledot, I'm going to kill Yaakov, my brother. Yaakov sends messengers to Esav Ahiv, hoping that brotherliness would create a message of forgiveness, hoping for that. Realizing, however, Hatzileni nami yad ahi miyad Esav, however, that very brotherliness can be extremely dangerous, and therefore miyad ahi miyad Esav. And they do come, and it seems to be within the pshat that the brotherly love overpowers the anger, and they do have that rapprochement, they do get back together, and they make up. Nevertheless, Hazal are not so convinced of what type of brotherliness there is there, and Hazal say maybe that brotherly, quote-unquote, love is really covered by brotherly hatred. That's how we see the beginning, Yaakov and Esav, from the time we meet them until the beginning of Perashat Vayishlach, right? At the end, however, things change. By the way, in the beginning of the Perashah, where is Esav living? Well, where does Yaakov think he's living? Where does Yaakov say, I'm going to come meet you? Seir, right? Right? He thinks he's living in, Yaakov addresses him, right? Seirah, right? He's living in Seir. Just keep a point. At the end of the Perashah, where does it say he's living at that moment? When does it say that Esav moves to Seir? I'll just read you the pasuk. So good. In other words, at that point he's going back to Seir, but the end in Lamed Vav, ויקח עשיו ונשב ברותיו וכל נפשות ביתו בקרב וכל בהמתו וכל קניינו אשר רכש בארץ כנען וילך אל ארץ מפני יעקב אחיו. When does he leave Canaan? Only after Yaakov comes back to live there. But in the beginning of the parasha, you just told me he was already in Seir, because he's returning to Seir, and Yaakov is saying, I'm going to come and meet you in Seir, meaning he's been in Seir before Yaakov, while Yaakov was still in Haran. In Perek Lamed Vav, he's living in Eretz Canaan, and he leaves only because of Yaakov. Why? כי יערך ושם רב ישב יהלך לארץ מגויים לשאת אותם בפני מקניהם. וישב עשיו בהר שעיר, עשיו הוא אדום. What happened? Good question. Any answers? Any thoughts? Here it says he left only because of Yaakov. Over there it seems that even before he came back, he's already in Seir. No? Nobody saw this? Thought about it? Any questions? Any answers? Okay, we'll get back to it then. I'm not sure I'm going to fully answer it perfectly. But the question will be powerful enough to get a message across. By the end of the Perashah, Esav changes. Right? One more point about Perashat Toledot. Esav marries a Canaanite woman. He sees... What?
We see where they meet up? No.
Where they meet up? No. Yeah. Within the Pshat, not really. Right? Not really.
I mean, the only thing you say is he came to get his Canaan, went back to Seir afterwards.
No, but that's difficult because it says that he's living in Canaan and he moved to Seir Mipnei Yaakov Achiv.
Right. And he came back to Canaan.
Why would he come back to Canaan? It doesn't sound like he's coming back to Canaan. It says, Vayashav bayom ahu Esav ledarko Seirah. He returns to Seir. You mean he lived there for a while and then for some reason he came back and then he moved because of Yaakov? He thought he'd get along with Yaakov in Canaan, didn't get along, moved back. It's not in the text at all. No hint of it. Right?
So after they meet, why are they assuming that they're going to the same place? Just curious.
They're not. They don't assume that. Yeah, that's probably a gesture. And Yaakov says, no, I'll come and see you. Right? Don't call me, I'll call you. Right? It's fine. I'll catch up with you and see it. Right? Right? And the Gemara points out he never did that. When will he do it? Only in Yemot HaMashiach. Right? Yaakov never did that. Not interested. Okay. But that's a side point. We're going to leave that question on the side. Right? To understand what that means. Right? But, as I mentioned, we talk about in Perashat Toldot, we see Esav's wives. Who are they? Well, there are these Canaanite women that are Morat Ruach to Yitzhak and Rivka. So Esav tries to maintain some form of semblance of normal relationship with his parents, and therefore doesn't divorce them, but seems to marry other women, which he believes might be more suitable to Yitzhak and Rivka. Right? Which is great. Very nice. And so it seems to be that at some point Esav is trying to live in Yitzhak Avinu's house under the rules of Yitzhak Avinu on some level. However, at the end of the Perashah, right? Now, Perek Lamed Bav, the only thing that would change for Esav is Perek Lamed He Kav Zayin Vayavo Yaakov Yitzhak Aviv Mamre Kiryat Arba Hebron Gesher Gar Sham Abraham Yitzhak. He lives. It's very clear that Yaakov is living in the place of Abraham and Yitzhak. Now, Esav Now we re-meet Esav again in Perek Lamed Vav. And all of a sudden we're reintroduced what? To his wives. And we're reminded right away, Esav לקח את נשיו מבנות כנען, את עדה בת אילון ואת ליבה בת ענה בת ציבון החיבי. And then, almost as a side, we don't even say, ואת basmat vayishvel achot nevayot. Right? In other words, why do the Benot Knaan seem now to take center stage here? And then when we get to Bet Basai, it doesn't say Lakah et mi Benot Yishmael, just says it's clear that we're all of a sudden reasserting the point of Benot Knaan in Esav's life. I think at this point, and we'll see, we can only understand why through conjecture, Esav has given up. Esav says, okay, Yaakov is back. Who knows? It very well think that Esav thought that Yaakov is going to live the rest of his life in Haran. He spent 20 years there. That year or two turned to 20. Yaakov may be interested in his in-laws, not interested in his parents anymore. It's over. Yaakov's out of town, and I will live here, and I will be under the house, so to speak, of Abraham and Yitzhak. I will continue the nation. I will be the populator of Eretz Canaan. By the way, I may have my main house in Seir, but it doesn't make a difference, right? I may live, either I have a summer house in Seir, or guess what? I personally have my main house in Seir. My geographical location might be there, but that's immaterial. Doesn't make a difference. Till Yaakov comes back, his focus very well could be in Canaan. However, when Yaakov comes back, then we're told it's a little different. Look at the Lashon here, which we don't see. Compare it to Yaakov. ויעבור יעקב אל יצחק אביו ממרא כי הייתה בחברון אשר גר שם אברהם ויצחק. He comes to the place where Abraham and Yitzhak live. The next, in Perek Lamed Zayin, Pasuk Aleph, וישב יעקב בארץ מגורי אביו, ארץ כנען. How does that mean Canaan? It's מגורי אביו. That Canaan is unimportant. Now let's look at Esav. פסוק למד ו' פסוק ו' ויקח עשיו את נשיו ואת בניו ואת בנותיו ואת כל נפשות ביתו ואת מקנהו ואת כל בהמתו. He takes everything. ואת כל קניינו אשר רחץ בארץ כנען. Everything that was in Canaan. וילך אל ארץ בני יעקב אביו. He abandons the nation, abandons Canaan. He takes everything he owns. The pasuk goes at great lengths. Everything. He leaves nothing. And what does he do? He leaves Canaan, goes to a different land. Why? Because of Yaakov. כי היה לך שם רב משבט יחדיו, ולא יכלה ארץ מגוריהם לשאת אותם מפני מקניהם. Then, וישב עשיו בהר seir. He dwells in Har Seir, and here's an amazing line. Esav hu Edom. He becomes Edom. He's no longer the brother of Yaakov. He is no longer the son of Yitzhak, no longer interested. He moves, he has an affiliation with Seir, and he becomes Edom. So maybe to answer the question, yeah, he may have lived in Seir. He may have been headed to Seir. Maybe he lived there, he had a house in Seir. That could have very well been earlier. What happens when Yaakov comes back? He uproots any connection to the land of Canaan. I don't know if he had two houses. I don't know if he lived one place, considers himself everyone has a house in Israel, right? He sold his house in Israel. That's it, right? He didn't go there for the holidays anymore. He didn't go visit. Whatever he had, whatever he did, whatever connection he had to Eretz Canaan was absolutely and totally uprooted. That was it. It was gone. No, absolutely not. What I'm saying is that he may have been living in Seir. I don't know, you want to say part-time or maybe full-time, but nevertheless, he was affiliated with Canaan. Yaakov wasn't there, right? Whatever dwelling he may have had there, it was temporary, whatever it might be, but his affiliation was closely and total with Canaan. When Yaakov comes back to this point, the Torah has a different context to that move. The context is what? He uproots everything and he becomes Edom. He no longer relates to the family anymore in that unique area. And therefore, you have all the description here is a description which makes Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov totally irrelevant. You talk about the Melachim, and by the way, the Pasuk explicitly says, all these are Melachim of when? When do they reign? What? Right. Meaning it's totally in opposition. In other words, he is now a unique and separate entity. It's a new type of Esav, a new type of person. Esav now becomes Edom. So already we have, that there is no, it's not relevant to Israel. His Melachim are independent of the Malchut Israel, independent of anything happening to Israel. He's totally separated and severed that connection to Israel. Now, okay, that's Esav, the person. We'll leave them, right? So we go from brotherly quarrels to separate nations that are irrelevant from each other. Right? Edom has nothing to do with Israel. Israel has nothing to do with Edom. Esav, as a human being, will never again be mentioned in the Chumash. Right? Although the Midrashim will pull him back every now and then, they'll never be again mentioned in the Chumash at all. As a person, he becomes irrelevant. He's severed his connection with the family. He's moved on. He's created his own independence. He becomes Edom. Once we say that statement, Esav hu Edom, goodbye. Goodbye, Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov. I'll see you later. I'm moving on. Can't live with you people anymore. That change, that dichotomy, reappears many places. Let's move on really to the next time we see Edom, B'midbar Kaf. Now watch what happens. Pasuk Yud וישלח משה מלאכים מקדש אל מלך אדום, כה אמר אחיך ישראל, אתה ידעת כל אשר מצאתנו. Listen, let us pass through. Why? You're our brother. כה אמר אחיך ישראל. No other nation is, aside of Edom, is called brother in the Mikra. Ever. Never Ishmael, never Ammon, never Moab, never. Edom, we call our brother. Many different places. So what happens? Edom says no. Right? And by the way, if you look, he talks about him, listen, he talks like a brother would talk. We went to Mitzrayim, please, na'ava b'ranatzecha, right? We're not going to eat or drink anything. I'm going to kill you. Don't come. That reminds us of Esav, the brotherly hatred. You're not passing through. Then Moshe says again, what voice is? ויאמרו אליו בני ישראל במסינה נעלה וממך נשתה אני ומקנה ונתי מכרם רק אין דבר ברגלי אעבורה. Then it says what? He says, okay, I got it. You're not our brother. I'm not going to mention brother anymore. Sorry. That was the wrong word, Moshe says. We'll pay you. You're a nation, we'll pay you. There's going to be a good financial deal for you. Interesting. Where's the more threatening one? When you're my brother. I'm going to kill you. Right? I'll kill you. Right? The other one is lo ta'avod. He comes back. I'm kaved, yad hazaka. Don't come through. So again, we have Esav as brother. Okay. Esav as brother, Esav as nation. The same idea is repeated when Moshe Rabbeinu preached it in Devarim Bet Yud Daled. Devarim Bet Yud Daled. 1 second. No, I made a mistake indeed. Could I have a mikroot gedolot? Bet, maybe? Yeah. Yeah. Bet het. ונעבור מאת אחינו בני עשיו, היושבים בשעיר מדרך הרבה מאלות ומציון גבר. Right? Ahenu, right? We're called here Ahenu. Now, very interesting on that pasuk. Right, because in Bet Daldos it says Atem overim b'gvul achem b'nei Esav. Right? So he says, the Ramban on that pasuk says, Achem b'nei Esav sheyahus Yisrael min Abraham v'kol zarahim ki kulam hem nimolim. Says somehow he believes that they were nimolim. Right? There's an ahva here. רק בני פילגשים ישמעאל ומדיין וכל בני קטורה אינם באחווה. כי הכתוב ביצחק יקרא חזרה. The Ramban says there's this absolute ahva that happens with Edom. Right? Devarim Bet Daled, right, was the pasuk I was looking at, not Yud Daled. And he brings it from Lo Tita'ev Edomi ki achichahu. Again, Devarim Kaf Gimel Het. Right? Again called Ah. And there's this relationship of lo tita'ev ki achichahu. By the way, not everywhere does the Torah relate to Edom as a achi. For example, when are they considered the ultimate evil, even in the Chumash, before we get to the Nebi'im, right? Shirat Hayam, right? Shirat Hayam. What are we told about? We're coming back, and who's scared? Alufei Edom, right? Edom, they're scared, right? Because obviously they're. So there's this interesting back and forth in the Chumash. They're They don't let us go through. We deal with them again, not as We relate to them as ahim when Moshe Rabbeinu retells the story. And Ramban points out that there's this tremendous We're commanded not to be mitayev edomi because he's our However, we consider them our enemy as the velu of Edom. In the Gemara and Kiddushin, Daf Yud Het questions, right? Whether, right, goyim do inherit, right? There's this question: does a goy inherit? Does a goy not inherit? And the question about whether Edom is going to inherit or not may be a little different in the rule than regular goyim. So we have this interesting approach with Edom. Esav, the human being, and in the Chumash. Then we come to the Nebi'im. Right? Now, let's take a look at the different Nevi'im and the way they handle Esav. I'd like to start not with the first chronological Nevi, but with the first Nevi in the order of the Nevi'im. I'd like to start with, and here we're going to flip back and forth a little bit between Yirmiyah and Obadiah. So open Yirmiyah Memtet. That's the chapter. Now remember, what's the context here? Let's have to go back to Yirmiyah a little bit. What's the context of us dealing with Edom Yirmiyah Memtet? Well, it really starts from where? From Memhe, Memvav. What's happening? What are we dealing with? Not Memhe, I'm sorry, Memvav. Nevi ala Goyim. And there are multiple Goyim that Yirmiyah goes and talks about. Right? And amongst the nations that he yells at is what? Edom. And Edom gets his attack in Perek Memtet. So let's look. Now you're going to have to flip back a little bit. In Perek Memtet, Pasuk Yud Dalet. Shimua Shamati. Right? Me'et Adonai, V'sir Bagoyim Shaluah, Hitkabsu Bo Aleha, V'kumu Lemilchama, Ki ne katon netatika bagoyim, Bazui Ba'adam. Right, he's katon, he's bazui. Tiflasetcha, Hisiotecha, Zidon Libecha, Shochene Behagve Asera, Tovse Marom Giv'a, Ki Tagbia Kanesher Kinecha, Misham Oridecha Neum Adonai. Sound familiar, by the way? Anyone except Josh, right? So okay, just in case didn't sound familiar, all you have to do is read the first few psukim, flip to Obadiah, and let's read. Who wants to read psukim Aleph, Bet, Gimel, and Dalet? Anybody? Volunteers? Okay, I guess not. I'll do it. Hazon Obadiah kom Adonai Elohim leEdom. Shemua shamanu met Adonai v'sir bagoyim shulach. Kumu v'nakum alei lemilchama. Hine katon netatika bagoyim. Bazui ata meod. Zidon libecha hisiecha. Shocheni b'hagvei asela. Merom shivto omer b'libo. Mi yoridenu aretz. Im tagbia kanesher. V'im bekoavim simkenecha. Misham oridecha neum Adonai. It's striking. Right? It's striking. Obadiah came first, by the way. Now, go backwards in Yirmiyah. Yirmiyah Mem Tet Tet. And read that one. Someone read it. Who's going to read Yirmiyah? Huh? Im Boserim Baolach. Flip to Obadiah. Hey. Go ahead. One more. Right? Pretty similar, huh? The language is striking. It's repetitive nibuah twice. So Aleph Daled is Yud Daled Tet Zayin. Then He Vav is Yirmiyah Tet Yud. Very similar. But there's a difference. And anytime there's similarities, what do? We took a difference. What is the difference? The difference is the context. In Yirmiyah, it's part of a nivuah against goyim. Yirmiyah deals with what? Esav as the arrogant goy. What is the sin in Yirmiyah? What is the sin? The context of... So again, two main differences. One, Edom is not dealt with independently. He's dealt with as part of a litany of goyim. So that would indicate that what? That this is the Edom as a nation. This is the Edom, the separate Edom that has one of the many nations. That's who Yirmiyah is screaming at. So if that's the case, what is the sin he's accusing him of? What is the sin that Yirmiyah is focusing on of Edom? Well, we look back, he tells you. The sin he talks about is their arrogance, right? Their arrogance of you think, right? You are the smallest of the goyim, but what? You are arrogant, you rely on your power, you live in Hagvei Asela, your arrogance destroys you, you're total, you're a nation that has reliance on its own power, you're arrogant, that is your sin, and you will be destroyed because of that sin, right? That's what Yirmiyah focuses on. That's all Yirmiyah focuses on. Avajah, we'll get back to. Let's go to Amos for a minute, because there's another mention of Edom here. By the way, there are more Nebi'im, but I'm not going to point them all out. Ketuvim is filled with nasty comments about Edom, right? But Amos, Aleph 11. So this one you've seen already. כה אמר אדוני על שלושה פשעי אדום ועל בעלו השיבנו. על רודפו בחרב אחיו ושיחת רחמיו ויטרוף לאדפו ועברתו שמרה נצח. Right? So what happens here? There are sins of Edom. And what is the sin here of Edom? The sin here of Edom is an abandoned brotherhood. Right? This is the other sin. So now we have Yirmiyah that talks about a nation, an arrogant nation, a simple katan nation, a lowly nation that relies on his power and therefore has a sin of arrogance and will be punished. And how will he be punished? No matter how high you think you get, I'm going to smash you down. Right? If you're from like the Neshit, I'll bring you down. Ben Kochavim, I'm going to knock you down. I will crash you down because of your arrogance that you rely on your power. The sin in Amos has nothing to do with that. The sin in Amos, ironically, as well in Amos, is part of litany of nations. But when he gets to Edom, what does he talk about? That's not how a brother behaves. That's a different sin. So if we go back to Esav now, we have the two aspects of Esav within Edom in the different points of the Nevi'im, right? There's the early Esav, there's the early Esav, and there's the second Esav. There's the first Esav that lived in Canaan, even though he also lived in Seir, and then the second Esav who moved out of Canaan altogether. Esav hu Edom. Two Esavs, two Edoms. Those two Edoms appear by Moshe Rabbeinu, two requests, and now the Nevi'im are dealing with them. Two Edoms. One attacked by Yirmiyah for Ga'ava, and one attacked by Amos for being a non-brother. Now we could begin to approach Obadiah. Because what is Obadiah is his whole Nevuah is only Edom. All he cares about is Edom. And now Obadiah does something interesting. Obadiah, for a small perek, merges both. Merges both attacks. Obadiah is broken up. There's many different, also for a small book, the smallest book in Tanakh, right? There is I've seen 4 or 5. Dat Mikra brings 2, other commentators of ways how they break up Obadiah, right? I'll take the simplest one, right? You can break it up into 3 or 4, some have 6 parts. In other words, we'll break it up with the first way Dat Mikra takes it because it fits with what we want to do the best. 1, yeah. One, Pasuk Aleph to Tet, which he calls Zedon Libo Shel Edom. Zedon Libo Shel Edom. Where do we see that? That's Yirmiyah. By the way, all the parallels to Yirmiyah were from the first part of it, of Obadiah. The first 9 psukim. Actually, it was the first 6 psukim. Right? So, he says the first 9 psukim, if you read it, he focuses on Zidon Libo Shel Edom, the arrogant sin. However, in Yud to Yud Daled, he focuses on what he calls HaHamas She'asa Esav LiYaakov. Esav, we go back to Esav and Yaakov. So, that's why I wanted you to read the book. That's what I wanted to, before I started, I asked you to read it quickly. If you find this, right, in other words, so we've already read the psukim in the beginning. Exactly like in Miyah, Zidon Libo, and I'm going to bring you down, and, you know. Then, look what happens right away at Pasuk Yud. Mehamas achicha Yaakov techasecha busha. You should be embarrassed. Achicha, your brother. V'nichrat leolam. ביום עמודך מנגד, ביום שיבות זרים חילו, ונוכרים באו שערו וירושלים ידעו גורל, גם אתה כאחד מהם. You were the enemy. How could you be? How could it be? ואל תראה ביום אחיך ביום נוכרו. אחיך, אחיך. The sin here is not even so much what you did. The sin is how you watched other people hurt him and you didn't do anything. ואל תשמח לבני יהודה ביום עובדם. ואל תגדיל פיך ביום שרה. Right? Yom Edom, you watched. How could it be? What do you mean, how could it be? So all of a sudden, the Navi here flips from Obadiah, flips from Yirmiyah, with the stark parallels to Yirmiyah, to Amos. Achicha. Never says Achicha in the first 9 psukim. You won't find it. I think maybe, actually, you'll find a hint of Esav Beritecha, but not really. That's mostly really because of the just the normal nations of Berit. All of a sudden, when we hit Yod, you don't have a pasuk without it, right? Pasuk Yud Aleph, not necessarily, but the idea of and it comes now is how do you watch that happen? So Obadiah really gets both, right? And that's why. The sin after Pasuk Yod is not so much what they did or didn't do, but the rejoicing at the destruction, right? Who can rejoice at someone else's destruction? That comes from a hatred of a brother. Let's go back to where we started from. The brother that is wrong will either hate you or love you. He won't be parf. Right? The rejoicing of your downfall is something that the brother now, the bad brother obviously, takes part in. Right? Well, remember Tehillim, right? Zechor Adonai libnei Edom et Yom Yerushalayim, right? What did they say? Aro ad yesod ba. Right? Right, that they saw it and they encouraged it. They didn't necessarily do anything, but they encouraged the destruction. Right? Megillat Echa. Sisi v'simchi bat Edom. You're happy, huh? We're waiting for what? Gam alayich ta'avor kos. That jealousy of the brother, that happiness that his own brother is being destroyed, that ultimate evil of jealousy, of betrayal of the brother. That's what the Navi of Obadiah does at the end, right after 10. In the beginning, it's like any other nation, right? We could, in Psukim Aleph to Tet, as well as in Yirmiyah, you could take out Edom, put any other name in, and it would fit. You're corrupt. You're a nobody. You're a zero. You're the least of the goyim. But you think you're great, and you think you're running on your power. I'll take you down. I'm God. I'm going to smash you down. You just watch. It could really be anybody. It's not unique to a brother. It's not unique to Edom. It's just an enemy. So Obadiah, what I want to merges both in Obadiah, merges both anti-Edom nevuot. And again, that's why the sin in the beginning is similar to other nations. What you're doing, what you're destroying, how you're killing. Right? You had a breach. That we say that about Mitzrayim. We say about that. You had a breach. You were unfaithful to the breach. You destroyed. You killed. And we do know. Open Sefer Melachim. There is battles between Yehuda and Edom more than almost any other nation. Right? And therefore the punishments are also different. Right? In the first 10 psukim, they're punished for their pride like any other nation. At the end, but what's interesting, at the end of Obadiah, who's the punisher in the beginning of Obadiah? Who punishes Edom? Who? First 10 psukim. Who's the guy who's punishing Edom? God. God. In Yirmiyah, who punishes Edom? God. Who punishes Edom at the end of Obadiah? This is something unique and interesting. Yeah. Pasuk Yud Zayin. Ubehar Tzion tiyeh pleta, v'haya kodesh v'yarshu bet Yaakov et moreshehem. It's the first element of the punishment. What's the worst punishment for a jealous brother? To watch the brother he hates succeed. Right? Then what happens? Pasuk Yud Het. Who's going to punish Edom? V'haya bet Yaakov ish, ubet Yosef lehava, ubet Esav lekash, v'daleku bahem v'achalum, v'lo yesarid lebet Esav ki Adonai diber. Who's punishing them? Yeah, Israel. Because this is a brotherly sin against Israel. The punishment is not God to extract against Edom, like any other nation. This punishment has to come through Israel. And it continues. Okay. And of course, the end, that has to end this way. ועלו מושיעים בהר ציון לשפוט את הר Esav. The end will be that the destruction of Esav will come through whom? Har Zion, Israel. Because the sin is a sin against Israel. And therefore, it can only work that the punishment has to come through Israel. Because this is talking about the brotherly sin. So the two sins mentioned throughout the Nevi'im result in two unique different punishments. Right? The Yirmiyah beginning of Obadiah punishments like any other nation. The end of Obadiah punishment, right? We'd expect it in Amos, but Amos doesn't really deal with it that much. But certainly here, the end of Obadiah punishment is the punishment that who kills, who destroys, it has to be the brother who was abandoned. It has to be through Israel. I want to close with a midrash because it's okay. So we have a nice message. But the Midrash does something else unique with Edom that I didn't mention. That has really nothing in the time of the Mikra. But I think we can understand it. Now that we understand the Peshat, we can even appreciate the Midrash. And as far as I know, the Dirashot of Hazal begin only in these type of Dirashot begin in the Gemara. Right? If you take a look, in Perek Lamid Vav, Rashi says, right, after where's Bereshit? Okay, it's okay, you don't need it. Right, after all the Alufim, he says, Aluf Iram, Aluf Magdiel, on Aluf Magdiel, Rashi says, Zeromi, which is funny. In the Midrash, we know we've always had a country of Edom. It stays there throughout the first and second temple period. And post-Second Temple period, who comes from Edom? Hordus is an Edomi, right? He's Edomian. We don't really talk about it. And the Maccabim really oppressed the Edomim, forcibly converted. That's where Herod comes from, right? But when we get to the Gemara, who becomes the children of Esav? All of a sudden, it shifts now. And we talk about Galut Edom as whom? As Rome, and eventually Western civilization. But the Gemara talks about, the Gemara Navodah even talks about after Rome destroyed the Bet HaMikdash, they had a certain procession. And that procession has a Jew on the bottom carrying what? A Roman. And they say psukim, where the one up is on the top is Esav, and the Jew on the bottom is Yaakov. And they tell him, you see, it didn't help you, the stealing of the brachot of your brother. We won at the end. All your corrupt Jew dealing doesn't work. It's the Gemara. Because the Gemara personifies Rome as Edom. So there's an interesting, and I don't know that this is why they did it, but by the way, I don't think we find this, and I could be wrong, in 2nd or 3rd century. Who is the Edom that Chachmei Talmud are dealing with? Who runs Edom now? Who runs Rome? Who is in charge of Rome? Right? In the 5th century, certainly by then, who's in charge of Rome? The Christians. Right? They're Rome. The Christians are running Rome. In other words, after Constantine turns things around, it's interesting. And I'm not saying, like I said, this is my own midrash. I'm not saying this has anything to necessarily flow, but it's just an interesting philosophy. There are two Romes. There's pagan Rome, right? There's the Rome of Pompey. There's the Rome of Julius Caesar. There's the Rome of Augustus Caesar. There's the Rome of Vespasian and Titus, right? How do they deal with us? There's no unique and special relationship. We are a conquered nation. We rebel. They treat us like they treat anybody else, right? They don't care about us any uniquely. It's Rome. Rome is the empire. We are Elia Capitolina, the captured city. When we rebel, they get angry. That's pagan Rome. Titus puts down the revolution, Vespasian and Titus, with ferocity. Later at the Bar Kokhba revolts, Hadrian puts it out with ferocity because we are annoying. We are a rebellious city that annoys the empire. They have to put us down. And we don't stop fighting them. That's pagan Rome. That's Edom. However, and they don't look at us any unique special status. They don't really care about us. They don't hate us more than anybody else, and they don't love us more than anybody else. We're not special to them, and we're not hated. We're just there, and we're annoying, and we keep rebelling, and we keep wanting this, and we don't put their avodah zarah on our Beit HaMikdash, and we just stop. We just keep fighting them, so they put us down and they just kill us the way they would deal with anyone else. However, when Constantine takes over Rome, when the Christians takes over Rome, there's something very unique. Historians debate and they look at the part of the origins of anti-Semitism. I mean, some believe it's a little bit earlier than Christianity. Baby's father, Ben Zion Netanyahu, talks about the origins of the Inquisition. He talks about the origins of of anti-Semitism just before Christianity. In Alexandrian Greek society of Alexandria, that's where it really begins. And we see there's some anti-Jewish people. However, most historians will look at Christianity and as the beginning of anti-Semitism. When I see anti-Semitism, it means anti-Jewishness. In other words, the people who come and write and hate Jews to hate Jews, that comes from whom? That comes from, and that can only come from, within. Hatred like that can only come from your wayward son. Because it can only come from within. By the way, that's why Islam never had anything to prove. That's why they never hated us as much. In other words, the psyche of Christianity was they had to prove that they are the true Israel. So they had to make us evil. They had to put us down. Because there was change. They were one of us. They now moved past. So Christianity creates the idea of anti-Semitism. That's where it stems from. It stems from the brother or the son, right? The real unresolved Oedipal complex. It just doesn't go away. In other words, that destruction, that hatred, it's unique to Christianity, right? Yes, Islam doesn't like any unbeliever. But there's no special status of lowliness to the Jew like there is in Christianity. Christianity deals with us with the hatred of Esav on the level of Ahi. So Rome itself, if it becomes the Midrashic Edom, follows suit. It follows suit that it begins like Obadiah begins, with another nation that needs to be destroyed because of their arrogance and their excessive pride. It ends under Christian domination with the hatred that only a brother can hate, right? That intense hatred, that ability to prove you're wrong, I'm right. And by the way, exactly what Obadiah says is what is true of Christianity. Christianity could not see the Jews succeed. The doctrine of witness in Christian theology needed to show that we had to suffer. Right? It's ironically saved us because we have to exist. Right? But you can imagine ways which you can exist through. Right? In other words, you had to live on some level. But you had to suffer a lot because that proves that you were wrong. You had to have a special status of suffering. And so that unique status of that special hatred reserved for the Jew was the hatred of our brother Esav. So I would say Miyad Ahim, Miyad Esav are two unique aspects of the way our enemy, the way the Nevi'im deal with Edom, the way Esav hated Yaakov, the way the Nevi'im deal with him. That's true. And as well, the punishment that they're going to get. And so, it epitomizes, it comes out really through, at the end, intended or unintended, through Midrashei Hazal, through the Christian empire. Now, like I said, I don't know, and I'm not sure you could prove it. My suspicion is, and I haven't really researched this enough, that by the time Esav, Edom becomes Rome, in Midrashei Hazal, in the words of Hazal, the Christians are already in charge. I don't know. I could be wrong. You have to check some of the Ma'amarei Hazal and see if they precede Constantine, if they're already in pagan Rome. I don't know. It very well may be, and then it's just accidental. But it would be interesting to note that if they all do come after Christian dominion, so then the painting of Edom to be Rome is an interesting component where it came from. It's that special relationship, that special hatred, right, that our brother hates us with, right? That's that unique point. It starts with the dots on the word Vayishakehu, right? He kissed us because that's what a brother does, but he really wanted to bite us. He really wanted to kill us. Right? And that's really where it comes. Halakhahi, Esav sonet Yaakov. It's Davka Esav that is soneh Yaakov, because he has that relationship. He's family, right? His family gone wrong. Nobody hates you as much as your family when they hate you. Gone wrong, right? And that's really that relationship that we have with Esav and Israel.